evil has finally found a home. Here's your relook at the McFarlane Toys movie Maniacs Series 1. Jason Goes to Hell, Jason Voorhees. Friday the 13th may have made this deranged serial killer famous, but it's McFarlane Toys that'll make Jason legendary. Figure comes included with axe, machete, spear, and a skull display stand to display the original poster artwork of Jason Goes to Hell. By the interest of Ian, one of my followers on Facebook who contacted me, asked me if I'd be willing to go back and have a look at Jason Goes to Hell Jason. I said more than happy to do so, Ian, and that's what's brought us to the dance right now. A bloodied dance, which can only start off well right now as we have a look at the figure's measurements. According to Jason Voorhees from movie Maniacs Series 1, the figure stands 7.2 inches in height, and that in centimeters works out to be 18.3 centimeters tall. Just for giggles, here is his versus counterpart, the Freddy Krueger that we just also recently had a look at. Both were pulled from movie Maniacs Series 1. Now, you could have gotten these figures standalone and carded on back. I prefer that look myself. There were also fish tank sets, which would have included both Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger matched and pitted against one another inside a plastic prison. A couple of people have gone that route as well. Whereas the first movie Maniac carded figures may be a little bit more expensive to pull, if you are in the market of picking these ones up for yourself, and don't mind that they don't come packaged on cardboard, might I recommend maybe going the route of the fish tank, as I've seen more deals on those surface, and you essentially get the exact same figures inside. Speaking of inside, let's have a look at the accessories that would have come included inside the packaging of movie Maniacs Series 1 Jason Voorhees. In a way, I'm disappointed that I don't have one still sealed. I enjoy the fact that I can actually pose what little posability, granted this one does have, but at least I can actually pose this one. But I would love to get a movie Maniacs Series 1 Jason just kept in packaging. It has a real sentimental value to me, and while I don't necessarily, it's not the figure that got me back into collecting. That award could be given to Freddy Krueger, but I feel almost more a softer spot to Jason, and the reasoning why I go back to this figure again and again. Anyways, let's have a look at the accessories that come included with the figure. First and foremost, let's look at the movie Maniacs display stand, which, if you have collected all the Series 1 stands, these stands are identical to one another. There's nothing that's changed between them. The skulls are in the same place on both sides, top and the bottom of the stand. You've got movie Maniacs written across the front there. And then, of course, if you spin it around, you're treated to more additional skulls, just with a brushing, a dolloping of black paint, just to fill in some of those recessed areas where you can see like the eyes and the nose and stuff like that all standing out on the skulls. We spin it around, though, we are treated to the original artwork of Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. A clever film in the sense that they shot additional footage that they knew wasn't going to be able to make it to theater, for the fear, of course, it was going to be rated X. Instead, Jason Goes to Hell was released as a director's version on VHS back in the day, and it was certainly one of those standout Jasons, as it had all the gore, all the other stuff that would go with, of course, a Friday the 13th film. It was all there. Nothing was cut out of it. Even to this day, some of those deaths in the original Jason Goes to Hell, that girl being sliced, of course, fanning out like a banana, that was gruesome. Still something that I enjoy watching to this day. Jason Goes to Hell certainly has a unique design to it. Even like the poster. The poster moves very far away from the conventional Jason Voorhees display. The hockey mask has now been swapped out for chrome, and we have now a slithering real representation of Jason slithering through the eye holes there of the mask. At the top we've got Evil Finally Found a Home, and then down below we have Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. They wouldn't be able to use Friday the 13th, so of course that's why Jason Goes to Hell is there, and also Jason X, a film released, of course, later on. So that is the display stand that comes included with the figure. I know, yeah, we've seen those stands countless times before. Let's have a look at the actual accessories that come included with Jason. He comes with a machete, which is just the strangest of machetes I've ever seen. The handle, for example, isn't made out of wood. It's supposed to be wood, but it actually looks more like it's been laced up like a boot. As you can see, it almost looks like it's been wrapped in leather. The blade is also something very different because it looks like it's vacuum formed chrome. Luckily, knock on wood, nothing has actually chipped on it yet. I wonder if over the prolonged use of displaying this figure, if I would start having flaking starting to come off of this. I have not seen this style of machete used since, and it really is a standout piece for Jason Voorhees. I don't personally care for this as much because it definitely doesn't look realistic having such a mirrored finish to it. I guess if you polished the blade, but then that would defeat the purpose because you've got all this dried, caked on blood on the end as well as splattered across the surface. That's on both sides. I do like in a way that it's got a chipped edge to it. I mean, Jason has been quite generous with his slashings using this machete, as it looks like there's been a lot of metal that's chipped off in the process. It does fit into his hand. I'll show you guys that in a second as well. He does come included with his axe. It's strange about the axe, though, if you look at the two side by side. Why the machete felt the need to be mirrored and then the axe isn't makes no sense to me whatsoever. The axe also has a more wood grain to it, whereas the machete does not. There's a lot of real differences decided between the axe and the machete that I gotta wonder there's two teams involved with making the accessories. One team decided it would be fun to use chrome. One team said, well, it would make more sense just to paint it. I think I kind of favor this team instead. This one is using silver paint instead of chrome. It still has a chipped edge to it. And as you can see, it's got that dark cranberry blood with what I might also say lighter splattered blood, again, across the head of the axe. Last and certainly not least, he does also come included with a spear. Now again, it looks like it's roping. It's very thick. It looks like it's wrapped black licorice, but at least you could justify that that's rope as opposed to what's going on here with the machete, unless that's supposed to be rope as well. The paint here is, again, closer to the axe, using silver paint as opposed to chrome. Still got blood on it. It's very soft. All of the accessories, well, not all the accessories, the spear is definitely the softest of the batch. Again, it seems like you've almost got three different team parties working on three different accessories for Jason because they all sort of stand out and they feel different to one another. Whatever one you decide to display him with, you only really have one option. You have to put it in this hand here. This hand is just a relaxed or aggressively dynamic hand. We'll go with that. Just take the machete and just wedge it in between his hand. Just wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Force that down as far as we could possibly get it. And then you got Jason Voorhees with the machete in his hand. Preferred to go this route myself as opposed to going axe or as opposed to going spear. Machete feels right. And if it feels right, we're going to stick with it. Let's move this out of the way because we certainly don't want a lot of stuff distracting what we're looking at here. We're going to also go ahead and wiggle the machete back out of his hand. I just feel like it's going to be in the way. I certainly don't want things in the way, so that we can focus, again, all of our attention on the original movie Maniacs, Jason Voorhees. Pulled from the script pages of Jason Goes to Hell, Jason Voorhees is somewhat inspired by Jason Goes to Hell. I've mentioned in previous reviews of this guy that it sort of feels like he takes cues from different Jasons. I mean, ultimately we settle on a Jason Goes to Hell Jason, which is the only other time that we've gotten a Jason Goes to Hell figure is from the Mezco Cinema of Fear line, which unfortunately I did sell that figure a long time ago. That one is obviously a little bit more accurate to the movie. This one again feels more inspired. Same with Freddy Krueger, felt more inspired. Jason does have a shorter shirt, yeah, but it's also tucked in. The only time it's really tucked in on this figure is this section right here, while this whole area is ripped open. It's almost like he's taken cues from Ash Williams. Like you can see a lot of opened areas where the shirt has just been completely ripped open. This would also have been gray in the film, and yet they chose instead to go blue. I'm okay blue because now in retrospect, I mean, when I look at the figure like this, it doesn't have to be the most accurate to Jason Voorhees from Jason Goes to Hell. I just like the fact it's Jason. And for that, I think I enjoy more so that it's blue versus the same coloring as the bottom of his costume. I gotta feel that that's the reasoning why they went blue. So it wasn't simply just the same dark gray that they went for the lower half of his torso. It's to note also that this one is the bloodied version. I guess the real indicator as well is the fact that all the accessories are heavily soaked in blood. But he does also have a lot of blood around his lower torso. He's got some blood splattered across his torso, and he's got some blood splattered across his shoulder. Makes up for a very bloodied looking Jason, even though there really isn't any blood actually anywhere on Jason's head or his mask for that matter. The mask has been outlined and airbrushed in blue. One thing that's notable about this Jason is the fact that he's got this really large nose that sticks out from his mask. Again, more creative, slight relaxation, a little slight slacking, I think, on McFarlane's part to give him the nose like that. But again, I think for a figure feeling vintage like this, I don't know, there's something about the fact that none of this figure really feels like his movie counterpart. And yet, that is sort of the charm that goes along with it. I don't know, maybe it's just me. One thing that is at least something accurate to the film is the raised little bumps on Jason's forehead as the straps of the hockey mask have been basically just plowing their way, leaving a groove and very tightly fitting into the sides of his face. So to the point where the mask isn't removable. It's funny that I would actually say that, because the mask isn't removable if you got this figure for yourself. And yet there were rumblings a long time ago that the mask was removable, and that so in fact McFarlane Toys actually did sculpt a face underneath all of that. Well, we can go ahead and take the face off. This does involve prying, literally and figuratively, to take the mask completely off. And I do have to tell you, the mask isn't really meant to be removed, but you can remove it, and if you take it off, you see what Jason's face actually looks like underneath. Now, I don't know why specifically they decided not to do this. I mean, again, it wasn't advertised anywhere that the mask was removable, and for the longest of time, collectors thought that the mask wasn't removable at all. But as you can see, it's pegged on both sides. There's a peg on that side, and a little rougher on this side, there's a peg that would have been also there at one point as well. And there's also holes on either side too. It just took a collector one day with some time on their hands and apparently very little regard to Jason Voorhees' face, decided one day to force the mask off. And as I'm showing you here in this review, it doesn't seem to damage the face necessarily. It doesn't seem to damage the mask. The only problem I do have with it is you can't always get the mask back in place. You really have to kind of force it back in and then sort of pinch the sides so it catches back onto those holes. Now, I would never display Jason without his mask. I prefer the mask on myself. I like that you can also see one eye staring right back at you with, of course, that barren socket on the other side. One middle triangular chevron is greeted to you, and then you've got, of course, the air holes on his hockey mask. But again, like I said, there's a lot of rips and tears on a figure that, if they based it solely on the film, this figure wouldn't look like this. Like I said, they did take a little bit of luxuries when it came to designing his character, sort of feeling like it's inspired on doing the bunny ears by Jason Goes to Hell. I mean, they're like looking at it. There's Jason Goes to Hell elements to it. The slightly tucked in shirt, the styling of his head, the styling of his mask. Again, like rips like this is just, again, McFarlane Toys wanting to do something a little bit different than just having a tucked in shirt for Jason Voorhees, which I always found that was really strange. A guy who's going around killing people and felt so the need to tuck his shirt in. Something also that's interesting about this particular figure, and I'm not going to be able to do it, but there's a seam line right here, right along the top, and right down on the other side here. It almost makes me think, and I thought this the first time I got this figure, that you could remove the halves off, or at the very least you could take the front of the torso off. One problem with that is the collar is sculpted all the way around. It doesn't look like it can remove, but it does almost look like there's a gap enough that you could pry this off. Now, I'm not going to go the route of prying this off. This is thin plastic, or over the time that I've had this figure, this has become a little bit more brittle plastic. Most definitely, if you're going to be prying this off now, I think one thing is going to happen. No, let me correct that. Two things are going to happen. One thing, you're going to break that chest piece. And the second thing is you're going to cry. You're going to cry a lot because you just broke your Jason. So While I do feel like there is possibly a fully sculpted torso underneath all of that, you get enough going for it, you can see through the holes, that you kind of get the full feel of what that torso looks like. It sort of looks like the chest of souls from Nightmare on Elm Street's Freddy Krueger. So I'm not going to pry that off. Even though it does look like you can, I mean, I know ultimately what's going to happen is two things again. I'm going to break it, and I'm going to cry. I don't need to be crying. Let's look at the figure's articulation. His head rotates back and forth. Everything really on this guy is really stiff. Large pegs make up for a figure that is very tight to move his arms around. The arms would rotate all the way around, but again, like the peg is being very stubborn, so when it usually comes to moving the arms, I move them only to about there. This arm really gets stubborn past this point, so I really don't want to fight it past that. And this arm does have almost the means to rotate it all the way around. I just don't like doing it, for fear that something, like I said, will break off. The arm on the ball joint, or not on the ball joint, the swivel cut there, swivels just above the elbow, just around the bicep section, and he also has the same thing happening on this side here. This hand does rotate, this hand does not. This hand at one point did rotate, and it did ultimately break off, that I had to glue it in place, so it's not going anywhere, but both hands in some ways actually do have rotation hinges. It might also just be the way that the hand was pegged in place in the first place, but the hands nonetheless, you can rotate them all the way around. He has a waist swivel, and legs articulate. That's about all you can really pull off for this guy. He has no articulation in his feet. As you can see, it just looks like a melted candle. Wax has just pooled. It's not literally wax, obviously, but it looks like just a wax bit of plastic has just melted all over his feet. They just look like they're a continuation of his leg. Nothing really feels at all that they stand out from the rest of the coloring. Kind of would have liked if they used the different coloring here that they did for the rest of the pants. So at least the feet would actually stand out. But a neat looking Jason nonetheless. Even though technically, we'll bring him in once again, even though technically Freddy Krueger was really the figure that got me back into collecting, heavily into movie Maniacs. I spotted him at, I think of all places, Zellers, and I picked him up. And then from there, it snowballed out of control. And I believe Jason Voorhees was the second of the movie Maniac figures that I picked up. Even though this one means more to me in the sense that it's the figure that got me back into collecting to where we are, of course, now. Jason Voorhees, though, it's a figure I love more than Freddy Krueger. If I was to have to give up my entire collection, people have asked me in the past, if you could pick a handful of figures to keep in your collection, what would those be? I would go this route with Jason Voorhees, and unfortunately I would have to part ways with Mr. Krueger, as Jason Voorhees would remain still in my collection. Do you have one of those figures that is clearly outdated? That if you compare it to some of the stellar stuff we're getting nowadays, really stands out like a sore thumb. The sculpting maybe isn't accurate to its original source material, the paint may be way off, and its articulation may be limited with 5 points of articulation or even less. Jason Voorhees for me is that example. Though comparing it obviously to some of the stuff that we were getting from Mezco later on with the Cinema of Fear line, or possibly down the road the stuff we may see eventually released from NECA, yes, Jason Voorhees from Movie Maniacs Series 1 and McFarlane Toys would look very primitive in comparison. And yet there's something so compelling about this particular piece that I would never find myself ever parting ways with it. It's a figure that if I had to grab a handful of figures that I'd want to keep and maybe save from being perished in a fire, Jason Voorhees of all others would be one that I would add to my basket. Yes, I would collect all my figures in a basket, a big woven basket with a big beautiful handle. But this particular figure does, like I said, fall under all those checked boxes of what feels like an older released figure. I mean, yes, it doesn't look anything like he appears in Jason Goes to Hell. He feels like he's a combination of Ash mixed with Jason from Part 7, mixed with Jason Goes to Hell Jason. Sort of all thrown together. We can really see that McFarlane Toys, when it came to releasing a figure like this, took some creative luxuries when it came to his design elements to it. His accessories, like his machete, for example, that I'm using here in Final Looks, is made of chrome, and it stands out like Jason, like a sore thumb. And yet, yet what it is. I mean, when it comes down to displaying this figure, I would display this one before I would display Freddy Krueger. And if you were to ask me what my top 10 favorite figures are of all time, you may find yourself surprised to find Movie Maniacs Series 1, Jason Goes to Hell, Jason Voorhees, making that list. He may not be high on that list, but he would most definitely hit my top 10 favorite figures of all time. Isn't that ridiculous? And yet, the attachment I have to this figure is bar none. It tops some of the other things that I have in my collection, and it would be spared, like I said, if a big giant fire ran through my household. Let's not hope that that ever happens. But Jason Voorhees would be spared. A little too bold? Should I have saved other figures? Let me know down below. I mean, certainly when it comes to it, from one collector to another, your personal tastes and interest in one figure may be different than mine. You may have a figure that you will defend to the end, unlike some other collectors may look at that figure and say, why would you keep such a basic looking figure? You may have a very same example of that yourself. Let me know down below in the comments section. Do you guys have a figure that others would consider to be incredibly outdated, and yet you would never find yourself ever parting ways with it? I would love to read your comments down below. In the meantime, today we were revisiting a re-review, if you will, of McFarlane Toys Movie Maniacs Series 1 Jason Voorhees. Still love this figure to this day, and a figure that I would love to pick up again and keep him sealed in his packaging. He's got interesting packaging as well, something of which I still wish I had, but well, we opened up the figure, and that's brought us to the game right here. If you want to continue this dance, enjoying the content on this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and turn on the bell notification. And keep your peepers peeled, members of the mob, because there are going to be more videos coming soon to this channel. It's not all going to be throwbacks to older looking figures, older figures that I've reviewed in the past. There is going to be sprinklings, of course, of old figures, but there's going to be a lot of content coming your way of stuff that's coming out nowadays as well. So there's a little bit of country, there's a little bit of rock and roll, and there's a whole lot of delicious sweet lemonade. As always, guys, thanks for watching as you always do. And I'll see you guys next time.